Hello there and welcome to another Two Pint problem coming to you from the Allsop Arms, very, very close by Baker Street in Sherlock Holmes' place in central London. I am joined by the usual suspects. Ian Scales, the Inspector Lestrade of TelecomTV, and of course Martyn Taylor, the Moriarty of Metaswitch. Gentlemen, welcome. I'd like to talk today, I'd like to begin with positing this. There's a lot of talk about how traditional operators, network operators, are going to compete with the OTT players. And Ian, we've got a bit of footage of Kerry Bailey, Senior VP of Cloud at HP, and he's talking about this very thing, about how traditional operators compete with OTT providers and how they can unlock the value of the network. So let's have a look at that.
The benefits for the telecommunication companies or the CSPs, it's monumental now, but if I broke it down just to a few things, I would start off and tell you revenue, okay? We did a survey of about 100 of the CTOs and CIOs in the top tier 1 and tier 2s. Their number one issue was revenue. So what it does for revenue is, as you know, there's a lot of over-the-top providers. They've come in, they've generated a lot of revenue that you would think would sit in the heart of the CSP, right? Mm-hmm. But they haven't been able to, the telecoms haven't been able to be flexible enough in their infrastructure to grab that revenue. Their system's too slow to get there, too locked in. So cloud will open up a big revenue stream for them. It will also allow them to compete with the OTT providers. And I think the third thing it's going to do is it's going to really unlock the value of these networks, right? For 100 years, we've built massive telecom systems around the world. That can't go by the wayside of OTT. This is going to help them really be able to unlock the value of their network.
So, given what's just been said, gentlemen, do you think that perhaps one way for the traditional operators to compete with the OTT players is by actually becoming more OTT-like themselves?
I'm not sure that's the answer, to be honest. I think one of the observations I make about over-the-top competition is that it starts with price. That if you look at where, for example, WhatsApp has been successful with messaging, there's a very direct correlation between the price of sending an SMS message and the penetration of WhatsApp. North America, where traditionally a lot of bundles come with 1,000 texts a month, then the marginal cost of sending a text message is nil, and people don't even think about it. You look at Spain or the Netherlands, for example, where traditionally it was expensive. You might get a bundle of 100, then every incremental one over that was 10, 15 cents or whatever. WhatsApp absolutely swept that whole thing aside. So I think you could argue that in areas where network operators have been arguably greedy about the way they price their services, the over-the-top providers come in, and by the time the network operator figures out what's going on, it's probably too late. They've lost it. The cost of delivering an SMS in a mobile network is absolutely microscopic.
Infinitesimal.
Exactly, yeah. And
yeah.
to charge 10 or 15 cents per message is, the margins are absolutely extraordinary. And I think this is where they can start to compete a little bit more effectively by including in the bundle non-traditional kinds of services. So going above and beyond the kinds of things that traditional voice and SMS can offer. And that's where I think the speed of innovation of NFV, for example, can give them a leg up, because they'll have the tools at their disposal that they can actually start experimenting with some of their services.
Yeah, but will they extend them as IP services, which is largely important, because it means that you can use other operators' infrastructure to send your services out.
Absolutely, yes.
And I think that's an important point about this too, that the next generation of services and apps are probably going to be over the top in that sense.
They will adopt those kinds of practices
yes,
of OTT. So once you've got an ubiquitous IP transport in place, then you can do all sorts of stuff,
exactly.
and the services will come by means of apps that get downloaded from the App Store. So all of those kinds of techniques will apply.
Yeah.
But for example, the services will key off of the subscriber's existing identity, which makes life easy, because the user doesn't have to create a new identity, new login, new password, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But absolutely, for example, the ability to use your mobile phone in a Wi-Fi hotspot when travelling overseas and not have to pay roaming.
Yeah.
That's a great way of
Strikes a chord with me, that.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yes.
And we are starting to see some of that happening.
Yes. And another area, I suppose, where there is traction for operators, presumably, is in M2M and IoT, which strikes me as being a very operator-friendly next step, where you've got lots and lots of connectivity that's going to be required in a geographically bounded area.
Yep.
And that seems, but again, it must be over the top in the sense that it must be open IP communications, because you've got to go beyond your own network footprint to deliver a viable service for it.
Yeah, and of course, in the M2M space, what you're seeing is the network operators are typically teaming up with industry verticals,
Yes.
the car manufacturers, for example, or the providers of electricity metering equipment or whatever. So it's very much a business-to-business kind of play, at least at the moment.
Yes, those applications can be network specific at the moment, but I think you're going to see less network specific applications where more on the IoT side, as we're sort of thinking about it, where the vendor of the washing machine or whatever just puts a sensor and some communications in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
In which case it has to be quite promiscuous in terms of which network it uses to get back to the to the shop.
And we're seeing over-the-top plays in energy management, for example,
Yes.
and home monitoring and those kinds of things, for sure.
Yeah. So in a sense, I mean, I agree. Actually, the track record so far has been a little disappointing, I suppose. About 3 or 4 years ago, when the big telcos started to think about this in terms of let's do a skunk works and do our own over the top and just see how it goes. You've got things like Orange Valley and Telefonica's digital division and so on. And it's been a little bit disappointing in terms of they certainly haven't taken off. There's been some retraction, especially on the Telefonica side, of course, with 2Me.
Well, I think you have to ask yourself, what's the internal dialogue in the telco look like around these over-the-top services? You can imagine people asking the question, what are we actually going to gain by doing this?
Yes.
Now, they might gain some learning, which might help them to do a better job of innovation in the services space.
Visibility was one of the big things. We're disappearing because people are now buying. I think they're just going to Facebook. Don't even see the telco. And so that was a big thing. We will give it away for free just so that we get noticed.
Yeah. But I think for it to make any sense in business terms, it has to become part of their mainstream. It has to become part of their main DNA, not be some offshoot on the side, which is potentially undermining and cannibalising their main business.
Yeah, I did an interview with Zainal Barber, who's a CEO of PT, as they call it now, Portugal Telecom as was, and he said to me, on the record, we're not a telco. We're not a telco anymore. We're an entertainment company. So that's one that's taken said, this is what we are, this is what we're going to be. I thought it was a very strange thing to say. But of course he's doing it, securing the knowledge that he's got a huge, great network there, this asset which is worth countless, who knows what, because nobody can quantify it. So it's one thing, for an OTT player to say and do all this stuff without a network. It's another for a service provider, a telco, whatever it may be, to have the network there and say, I'm going to do this, but what I've got here is the network, and what I've got here is all the data on all my subscribers and businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason that telcos do that is because it's very hard to differentiate purely on the basis of the network.
Yeah.
So, what is it in a user's mind or in a customer's mind that sets that offering apart? It's not the network, that's kind of taken for granted. It's the other stuff that you get with it. And that comes back to what I was saying a bit earlier, that telcos, there has to be a basic set of traditional services they offer. But if there is other stuff as well, and whether it's video over mobile broadband or whether it's some exciting new kind of messaging service, those are all potentially areas of differentiation and ways in which you can make the brand more visible by being associated with more of a customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, BT is a good case in point with their sports programming and so on.
Oh yeah, they've had it. Yeah.
But I mean, then difficulties come in, don't they? Because when you're in a world which isn't quite network neutral, you've now got a point where the owner of the infrastructure is competing with somebody like Netflix, who is pumping their data over the top, and he can set limit. He can sort of game it so that he's got an advantage. Which I think is going to be a difficulty coming up when they put caps on, but allow their own video streaming to go through.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of inequalities in the broadband world. I mean, you know,
It's an unfair world.
Well, I mean, what other kind of service do you pay a fixed fee for without any sort of guarantees as to what kind of bandwidth you get?
Yeah.
I mean, totally depending on how far you happen to be from the local exchange. I mean, we wouldn't sort of accept that in any other sort of walk of life. We'd say, look, I'm only getting 2 megabits. I'm only going to pay half what this other guy who's getting 4 megabits is paying. I mean, but we just accept that it's very imperfect.
We do, don't we? But maybe that's going to change. Maybe that's sort of ignorance marketing there, isn't it, really? People don't really get exercised about it because they haven't quite clocked it yet.
Well, I think it's actually, it's a measure of how far people are prepared to accept best effort as a quality of service. And you know, I think that's something that Telco should definitely pay attention to.
We're running out of time, gentlemen, but I just want to bring it back, Martyn, to things that are close to our heart at the moment, which is NFV and SDN. You mentioned NFV earlier on. How important, briefly, is that going to be in the cases that we've been talking about?
Absolutely crucial. I mean, all of the over-the-top operators use cloud techniques to build their services quickly and evolve them rapidly and scale them when they start to get traction and succeed. And that's absolutely what the telcos understand. They do now understand that's what they need to be paying attention to. And a lot of the excitement around NFV is about that. It's not about cost savings, which are kind of there and taken for granted. It's about the ability to innovate.
Well, you can't cost save forever. You have to do something else as well. So totally agree. Ian, what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I would go along with that. Although I would say that at the outset of this, the cost saving is going to be really important too. I mean, it's an incredibly expensive infrastructure to pay at the moment, and NFV is going to make a huge difference to that. But then after that, of course, you're on Moore's curve, aren't you? You've got to keep on doing that, and it turns into the computer industry, really.
There's a thought. We're out of time, folks, so thank you very, very much for watching, and I'd like to thank Martyn Taylor, CTO of Metaswitch, and I'd like to thank Ian Scales, Managing Editor of TelecomTV. I just happened to be here having a drink when they arrived, so see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.